All right, everybody, it's that time of year where we get to play What Killed My Crop? Woo! So I'm in a plot and we're getting a lot of symptoms like this. Now, foliar symptoms like this, a lot of people are gonna jump to SDS, sudden death syndrome. But we need to look deeper. Ugh. Answer, brown stem rot. One of the major things that's been kind of confusing this year in a lot of cases is that we think that we're seeing a lot of sudden death syndrome. But unless I actually go out into a field and start pulling and splitting plants, we can't be quite sure. So most years we really rely on this foliar symptomology. And we see this and we say, sudden death, it must be sudden death. But that intraveinal chlorosis is not specific to SDS. It's also an indicator of brown stem rot, phytophthora, charcoal rot. And this year we really had a smorgasbord of different and weird soybean diseases that we don't normally see. I started my career in 2009 and never have I seen this level of brown stem rot before. So it's also been really interesting to come into some of these plots and try to, do ratings or pull observations on sudden death syndrome. But every time I see a yellow spot of soybeans and I want to go, ooh, must not be good for sudden death, I have to go into every single variety and say, is it charcoal rot? Is it brown stem rot? Before I make those determinations. I'm finding a fair amount of cornfields where things are usually pretty green, but it'll be like green, 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 dead plant, green, 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 green. Anywhere from 5% of random dead plants up to 20% of random dead plants. So here is one of those random dead plants. We've got that ear turned down. All the leaves are brown. So let's take a closer look and figure out what killed my crop. I think that'll be a new series. What do you guys think? So we can see that the stalk is completely dead when we look at the color. A really key indicator here is going to be these kind of black splotches on the outside, on the rind of the stalk there. And as always, we are going to wait for it. We're gonna split this guy down the middle. Yeah. Okay. So when we open that up, we clearly have a stalk rot. So a lot of times Anthracnose, after it's been in here for a while, you're gonna get black that extends up and down the internode space close to the rind. This plant isn't to that point yet. But what's really giving us the clue that it's Anthracnose stalk rot is kind of these black splotches on the outside. So this guy has Anthracnose stalk rot. What's going on here is not killing corn, but it could definitely be of some concern. So these guys are really small. You see them? That is a sap beetle larvae. And what they will do is those guys are going to come in and they'll bore a tiny little hole in a kernel and then go inside it and eat all of it out. So we're going to be losing some kernels, but most notably and most concerning is going to be opening up that kernel and allowing a fungus or an ear rot to get in there. Not much we can do for them, but they're there. Know what you're looking for. So here we have another plant that ghosted out early. But when we look at it here, the stalk is actually still in pretty good condition. And when we split that open, the inside of the stalk and that pith is still white. It's firm and intact. So I'm a bad agronomist and I didn't bring my spade with me when I came out here. But like I said before, that stalk tissue is still pretty good. But when you split that crown down in there, it's starting to rot. So this guy died early from crown rot. Sometimes you can get into a little bit of chicken and egg when you get stalk rot. In a lot of cases when you get stalk rot, you dig that plant up, you split the crown, you will also very commonly find crown rot. So especially when we've been dry, it's hard to tell exactly what came first, because when you do have crown rot, you have a lot more cannibalization and weakening of that stalk, which will really hurry on the stalk rot. So a lot of times you'll find those two things together. Here's one that I'm starting to find more of. So the stalk is still plenty green. You go down below, it looks pretty healthy here. But, oh, that's hard to see. Here, I'll pull that plant down here. But the top of this guy is starting to die out. There's no indication of any tar spot or anything. So when we see this top dying back, in most cases it is Anthracnose top dieback. Let's take a look at the ear. The ear overall looks pretty good, nice development on it, and it doesn't really look like we're getting to an early black layer. So I would say that although we had Anthracnose top dieback on this plant, it's not really affecting yield a whole lot. It probably came in late enough. So I changed hybrids that I was in, and it was a very stark difference where that last hybrid had, 5 to 10% of plants that had that top dieback. I now transitioned into a hybrid that has only an average rating for Anthracnose stalk rot. So I am starting to see a much higher percentage of plants that are having the top dieback. We might see a little bit of yield reduction on the plants where it came in earlier, like this one here, where the ears turned down, and then it may eventually turn into Anthracnose stalk rot. But for now, these plants did have early death, maybe a little bit of yield loss, probably not too much. And then we need to make sure that we're coming out here and getting it in case it turns to stalk rot. So we are getting some ear feeding pests where you can see kind of this mottled appearance on these kernels, and they're also coming from around like a little dot. So that little dot is most likely the spot where a stink bug came and stuck a stylet in there, and then they shoot an enzyme into that kernel, which is what is causing that mottled appearance. So sometimes I'll be walking along and I'll have like this one plant that's like, I'm gonna stand right in your way. Oh, stink bug. So just like I was talking about on that last one, there he is. Hey guy. So I know that some people call this like the willowing effect. And in most cases, these plants were a late emerger. So if you look at him here and you look at the sides of his stalk, and it's much more narrow than his buddies over here. So in most cases, this was probably a late emerger, but he was still able to put on this huge honking weight right here. And then it just, honestly, it's just a matter of that stalk not being able to support this massive weight in it. So he was a late emerger, but he's actually still contributing to yield, but he can't hold on to it. Driving around, you see a lot of spots where it just looks like stuff is brown on the top. Let's go find out. So here's a pretty interesting one for you. Everybody is thinking a lot about like tar spot, some other stuff like that. But we're seeing extremely high levels of northern corn leaf blight in some of these areas. So we're seeing the top of these plants also having some early maturation because of high levels of tar spot. But when you consider that like this is one northern corn leaf blight lesion, and then we got two more from the road, this looks like a really dead leaf. I am blown away by the amount of northern corn leaf blight that we're finding. Now, in many cases, we are very close to black layer, so we aren't gonna see a whole lot of yield loss because of it. It's probably taking a great hold and really, filling out, holy cow, and really filling out because we're almost to black layer. It's just very incredible. So there's a lot of corn that is really having some unnatural death, where typically you think that the top of that plant stays fairly green until we get to black layer and those husks start turning brown. But now we're seeing a very quick transition, and you can see it from the road where the top of that plant is turning brown. Now, in most of these areas where we've got this going on, sprayed or unsprayed, it's happening very quickly, and it started happening about a week and a half ago. If you sprayed, you're just starting to see it now. I would say that a lot of it is tar spot. So you can see when you get kind of that darker brown color, a lot of that darker brown color is because of the tar spot. So we're seeing a lot of canopy death. This plant is senescing, so these leaves are falling off anyway, and tar spot's really taking advantage of that, especially as you start moving nutrients out of these lower leaves into the stalk and up into the grain. And then as we move up through the canopy, we do have a lot of tar spot, but the tar spot doesn't appear yet to be killing the leaf tissue. This corn right here is about half milk line, but one of the other what's really taking out a lot of leaf area in some of these cases is northern corn leaf blight. So you see all the black stroma here of the tar spot, but it's not really killing a whole lot. It's all these areas of northern corn leaf blight. So really, I'm thinking that if we're at half milk line right now, we might actually be seeing more grain yield loss to the northern corn leaf blight. And as this northern corn leaf blight starts taking more control and we get closer to black layer, then this tar spot's probably going to finish it off pretty hard. It makes sense to have both of these diseases together because they both like the same conditions. They like it a little bit cooler and they like having water. Haven't had a whole lot of rain, but we have been extremely dewy. So we got to a spot of this field that wasn't sprayed, and this stuff, it's pretty crunchy, it's pretty dead. So far we haven't lost a lot, I think, in terms of kernel and yield, but where this stuff is really severely affected by the tar spot and the northern corn leaf blight because it wasn't sprayed with a fungicide, instead of being half milk line, we're about 3/4 milk line. So we probably are going to lose a little bit in terms of kernel weight and test weight. My next concern is just is stalk quality later on, because to finish filling out these kernels without this leaf area, it had to pull it from the stalk even more. So that's going to be some of my concern on this stuff, especially that was not sprayed with a fungicide. Welcome to Agronomy After Dark, which translates into my husband is at a plot night with the 2 older kids, and I finally got the 2 younger kids to bed. And what better to do with my free time than talk about corn, right? Right. Yeah, I know. So a special shout out to tar spot. It really feels like it's going to come and leave a mark on us this year, and the last time it did that was 2018. So I would say that it feels like it came out of nowhere and it was there and now it's just killing stuff, but it's just doing what tar spot does. What I noticed the last couple years where we had it pretty severe is that it will be there, but it doesn't really start killing stuff until we get to about half milk line. And then I feel like it's a fairly opportunistic disease as far as robbing yield. And once we start getting to that half milk line and that plant really starts senescing naturally is really when it turns on those afterburners and it really starts killing that plant and taking out that leaf tissue. Up until about half milk line, you usually have some of those lower leaves are starting to, dry up and fall off, but it becomes very visual when you can see from the road kind of a different brown color showing up because of death from tar spot. So I think that the biggest trend that I'm seeing is that sprayed or unsprayed, whether it had fungicide applied to it or not. If we had fungicide applied to it at tassel, it was able to keep that disease from progressing until we're at about black layer. So I don't feel like we're going to lose a whole lot of yield because of it. However, some of these fields that did not get a fungicide application at R1, I think that we do have a chance of having some pretty severe yield losses as well as standability losses, because as that kernel was trying to fill out, it couldn't take it from the leaves, so it took it from the stalk. Not really finding or being able to tease out a whole lot of differences between hybrid, even in plots. A lot of our plots get fungicide applied to them. So everything's pretty equal as far as the levels of tar spot in each of these hybrids. And not only that, but it almost seems to correlate more with like a die and dry type of hybrid versus a hybrid that has good stay green or good harvest appearance because it always looks like it's just taking advantage of the senescence of those leaves. So a hybrid that's like, I'm done with these leaves, I'm gonna let them go, it just accelerates the senescence of those leaves. So fungicide, it seems like, is really gonna pay off this year. I know you think about, you don't have to worry about diseases in a dry year or in a hot year. And on average, yes, we were dry and we were hot, but when you look at the actual day-to-day temperatures, we did a lot of this with our temperatures. And every time we dipped down in temperatures into, the low 80s, upper 70s, it was a great opportunity for some of these diseases, particularly tar spot and northern corn leaf blight, to really take a hold, start propagating and spreading. And also, we want to think about that we didn't have a whole lot of moisture, but we also did have a fair amount of fog, a lot of dew, and that moisture is enough to get those fungus moving and infecting those plants. So that's all I've got for tonight. I'm gonna enjoy the rest of my evening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Happy harvest. If you got any questions, call, text, or email.